about the camping law, and we've experienced different things about how they regulate the parks here, right? So before, people were being arrested for being present, sitting in a park awake last Saturday night into Sunday morning, you know? Because there was real frustration with that, they negotiated to let us have only this space, and only for us, not for everybody else, to be able to be in, but not to sleep in, not to camp in, because it's a crime to camp. It's a crime to sleep in the city of Phoenix. And people get cited and fined and harassed for this law. And it's one of the broadest laws that I've ever seen, because I've looked at a lot of these laws. It directly says sleep like 5 times. So I just want to go over the text of the law real quick. Can you want a copy, please?
Got any more copies of that?
Yeah, does anybody, let me just get one and one, and if you want to give up the few others. This is Ted, by the way. Ted has experienced this, and wait, since he might have to go, because he might have a time limit, I just want him to, can you share your story real quick, Ted?
Well, mainly, what I want to go ahead and actually fight about is when a homeless shelter kicks out a person that has a disability.
Louder.
Main thing what I want to do is I want to go ahead and show people that
Just use this button.
kicking a person out because they have a disability.
Right.
Turn it up a little bit. Yeah, the main thing I want to show is I want to show that kicking a person out of a shelter because they have a disability is against the law, and these shelters do not have right to do this. And so they have already done this to me, and they kicked me out of the shelter because I had a seizure and couldn't go. So what I want to do is I want to show is the actual power that we have for doing this. And one thing is by showing the ADA that there is laws that do protect this. Thank you.
Okay, and so, you know, so sort of like he said, the shelters are very
I'll take one.
arbitrary in who they allow to stay and what they will pick you up for. Okay. There are certain people who are not allowed to be in the shelter at all. If you're a single man, there's a lot of competition for space because you're not very fundable. You don't look cute on a card, you know, for donors. If you, and so there's a lot of people who end up either they don't want to stay in the shelters because the conditions are so bad, or they cannot stay in the shelters. They pass their time limits. They said something that the staff member didn't like. They had a medical condition. They get kicked out arbitrarily, and there's this huge deficit in terms of the amount of shelter that is needed to basically shelter everybody who has issues of homelessness. You know, they want to invest, they invest in prisons in this state, but they don't invest in facilities, and the facilities are very arbitrary. So, and also can be have very bad conditions, like in the overflow shelter where the men, a lot of men sleep, about 300 men sleep. They sleep on asphalt, and there's them with like a mat, but there's like bed bugs crawling all over you and biting you, and you're just packed in there like sardines. And it's policed like a prison. You have actual cops on duty, you know, off-duty cops that are working in the shelter to police it, you know, and so there's no free speech, you know, there's no real rights, but it's partially because we're not holding them accountable, you know, and that's why there's laws like this, you know, that they want to do with laws like the camping law is either push people out of the city or push people into areas like the Central Arizona Shelter Services, the downtown shelter, so that we as, some of us are experiencing homelessness here. So, you know, and you never can tell by looking necessarily. So, but also it makes people who are not experiencing homelessness not see the people, not have to know that they're there, not have to deal with them, not have to deal with them being in their pretty public spaces, you know? Not having to know that there are so many people that have lost their houses in the economic downturn, you know, that it basically invisibilizes them and it marginalizes them. And also, you know, once you get in, there are many laws that criminalize homelessness. This is only one law. There's also like aggressive panhandling, there's loitering is used a lot, trespassing, things like that. And basically you can start accumulating convictions. Like people actually get paroled to the street, people who can't stay in the shelters, and then sometimes they get their parole violated because they're sleeping on the street where they were paroled to, you know? So the system doesn't make any sense, and it doesn't accommodate for it. They want to marginalize people and push them away. Now these laws like spread across the country about 15 years ago to now, you know, but most of them haven't been challenged. But in Los Angeles, they did get challenged. They had a sleeping ordinance, and let's see, which Court of Appeals were we in? Yeah, the Ninth Circuit, thank you. Which we're under as well. In 2006, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals affirmed an injunction against a city ordinance that prohibited overnight sleeping in public areas under the same Eighth Amendment rationale because the city did not have enough beds to house the homeless. A greater number of homeless people than the number of available beds. And basically, that's one of the reasons why the law is unconstitutional. I sort of want to go over like how broad it is. It's a very, very broad law, okay? And it really says sleep over and over and over. If you look at Tempe's law, it does not make it explicitly a crime to sleep. It made it explicitly a crime to sleep, and that's why we've been told here we can't sleep, you know? So, it's a misdemeanor crime, and it says, it shall be unlawful for any person to camp in any park or preserve or in any building, facility, or parking lot or structure, or on any property adjacent thereto that is owned, possessed, and controlled by the city, except as permitted in paragraph C. You'll find that irony in paragraph C. For the purpose of this section, the term camp means to use real property of the city for living accommodation purposes such as sleeping activities or making preparations to sleep, including the laying down of bedding for the purpose of sleeping, or storing personal belongings, or making any fire, or using any tents or shelter or other structure or vehicle, you can't sleep in your car, for sleeping, or doing any digging or earth breaking or carrying on cooking activities. If we cooked right here, we'd be camping. It's against the law. Okay. The above listed activities constitute camping when it reasonably appears, in light of all the circumstances, that the participants in conducting these activities are in fact using the area for living accommodation purposes, regardless of the intent of the participants or the nature of any other activities in which they may be engaging. So it's just straight up, it's a crime to sleep anywhere. It's a crime to lay down a blanket. It's a crime to lay down a sheet and sleep. It's a crime to, they basically modified the laws here so we get a special space. This is the only space right now in the whole city of Phoenix where they're allowing structures to be up overnight. And it's because of just the outcry of all of us, saying, why can't we do this? Why can't we have a protest? Why can't we be here? And the reason why we can't be here is because they've been marginalizing people, and we find out that we're the people too. We get affected by this ordinance. We want to speak out. One of the things that's not listed on the talking points is the First Amendment issue. Is camping a First Amendment issue? Do we need to stay awake the entire night while we're here? I know some people are sleeping, but they could be prosecuted for it at any minute. It's at the discretion of the city manager, you know, or city council, or the discretion of the police to enforce it. We get a special space. It's only because, but other people aren't getting this special injunction, you know? So it's important to remember, this is really exciting in some ways, because people who never knew that this law existed are suddenly going, man, that sucks, you know? Why did they pass that law in 2005, you know? Why can't people sleep outside? So it's really cool, actually, to see so many people that are interested in it, because most of the time the people that get affected by it are so marginalized that, you know, if they speak out, for example, against the shelter system, they'll get kicked out. If you know, if you have multiple convictions, including for sleeping, you're either going back into jail or prison, which costs a lot more than housing people, or you're going to go to, you just can't get an apartment, you can't get a job, it's very difficult. You just end up being perpetually marginalized. And the people who are perpetually, chronically homeless, because they're marginalized and because there's not enough services to help them, are the ones that use up most of the resources. And it doesn't make any sense to not actually just go with the cheaper option of housing, or even letting somebody sleep outside, you know, instead of putting them in tent cities, you know? So one of the things that that I also want to talk about was in the 1992 decision, Cottager versus City of Miami, a federal court ruled that the camping law was a violation of the 8th Amendment because homelessness is an involuntary status. You don't, people go on, oh, they're choosing to be homeless. They choose to be homeless. Well, you know, sometimes people will find a rationale that makes their life meaningful, you know? If you have to be homeless, maybe you go, oh yeah, I am homeless, you know? I am choosing this. But most people don't choose to be homeless. They're forced into homelessness because it's poverty generally poverty overlapping with some other issue, you know? Yeah, and you know, you just sort of fall into this trap, you know, so it's an involuntary status. And prosecution for homeless for essential life-sustaining activities to punish them based on this status is cruel and unusual punishment. And also, they said it was a violation of the right to travel under the 14th Amendment. And they also said, the court ruled, this was in Miami, so it's not the Ninth Circuit, we're not under it, but they said that homeless persons have a legitimate expectation of privacy in property seized in public areas. When you're in the shelter, do they throw your stuff away, Ted? If you're out there in the hospital, do they throw your stuff away? Yeah, if you're camped out somewhere, will they throw your stuff away? Will they just tear down whatever you have?
They don't want the responsibility of them having to do that.
So, yeah, people lose people. I've seen in past, one woman told me that she was in the hospital for 2 days. This is a story I've heard over and over again, but they had actually thrown out her stuff the day that she came back. And they said that she couldn't go get her stuff from the trash bin because it was a liability risk. If you are gone, they don't care. If you don't have a place to live, they'll get rid of your stuff. And we gotta realize that that's not constitutional. And it's also just not humane. It doesn't make sense. Why do you want to perpetually have people have to re-get their documents, or...
Plus, it's not their property.
Yeah, it's not their property, and we need to, we're not supposed to be unreasonably searched or have unreasonable seizures of property. I was not seizures, but anyways, these things don't just apply to people in cars or homes. you know? They apply to everybody. But because people don't speak out about it, the cops and the city act like the Constitution doesn't matter if you're poor. So
what can we do to change that?
So what we can do, maybe we can make we have a big sort of, we have a group that meets. We recently gave a report to the city council. We've done a bunch of demonstrations. Ted is also working on a thing about ADA violations, because there are a lot of ADA violations. But what we can do is it's the city council that has the authority over this law. And also we're working with the ACLU. So if somebody there are forms that we have. So if somebody here has experience being harassed or being cited or ticketed or fined for sleeping, we can report it to the ACLU, and we're working with the ACLU, and they've been talking to the city attorney and stuff like that. But like last time for the city council meeting, because people were frustrated about it, they came out and spoke out. You know, that's really what matters.
You gotta stand up.
The next meeting, if I can give people's email addresses, then we can email out the next info, and we can also send you the report that we made and also all the forms. And then you can send it in to the city attorney if you know somebody. So,
do you have a website that people
yeah,
can check in on?
Yeah, we have a website. It's sort of under development, but it's I'll put more stuff on it tomorrow. Okay, it is www.phxhomelesscampers.org. But if people are interested in being on the email list or the action list, I would really appreciate it if you want to, give your phone number or your email, because we'll just contact you. We'll never share this information with anybody else. It's 100% confidential, because we know that a lot of people that experience this, there's a lot of retribution. So,
They arrested me last night. They didn't even vocally say it to me. They went told somebody else, because I was sitting in a chair and I dozed for like a second.
Yeah.
They told him, hey, tell your buddy, if he dozes off like that again, I'm going to ticket him. Working on it. So tonight, I'm going to get a ticket.
do you want to fill out a form?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Where's my
Especially the people that have like different types of disabilities.
I remember them.
Okay, so I'm going to make
giving us warnings, and we would just get up and go and like lay down someplace else.
They have some kind of cancer.
I went home one night, so I don't know about that night. They ticketed someone last night, and they were being harassed, and I was so tired after 2 days. I didn't know my daughter.
Oh, is that the same homeless campers that have the Facebook group?
Yes, it's the face homeless campers that on the Facebook group.
Are these cases referred to the city attorney or the county?
Was it the
The
environment gets
ACLU
people
is
sick?
talking to the